welcome everyone again. And I wanted to first thank everyone for being here. This is our first college advising webinar of 2024. My name is Bridget E. McIntyre. I'm the Director of Strategic Programming and Partnerships at the Johns Hopkins Center for Talented Youth. CTY is excited to offer these expert-led college admissions workshops that are designed specifically for advanced learners in grades 8 and above, and their parents or caregivers. We'll be focusing on some of the biggest issues and most talked about topics in undergraduate admissions. Today, we'll be focusing on the college essay. I'm pleased to turn it over now to our experts from CollegeWise, Counselors Hanifa Abdul-Sabur and Matt Doyle. Hanifa and Matt.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. As Bridget said, Hanif and I are here representing CollegeWise. We are a national college counseling firm where we help students through their college search and application processes. My name is Matt Doyle. I've been with CollegeWise for 3 years now, but I've been in this admissions world for 13, and I've seen it from what we call both sides of the desk. I've worked in 2 separate college admissions offices where I traveled the country recruiting students and then read, evaluated, and helped make admissions decisions on the applications that were submitted to those colleges and universities. And then I worked for 6 years as a college counselor at an independent high school just outside of Denver, Colorado, where I did pretty much the same thing that I do now, which is help students navigate this college search and application process and hopefully avoid some of the mistakes that I saw students make when I was on the admission side of things. Hanifa?
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Bridget. Hi, everyone. My name is Hanifa Abdul-Sabur. I'm a college counselor with CollegeWise as well. My background is, I've spent my entire career in and around higher education. I have been in this college admissions space for several years, but in addition to it, I also have experience doing academic advising from the college side. So working with students who, from the moment they come to campus until they graduate from campus, and really seeing what goes into having a really great successful match between a student and the college that they attend, and what they bring to their college experience that helps them to succeed. So that filters a lot into the way that I work with my students through this process. My passion for this work comes from the fact that I had a really wonderful college experience myself. For my undergrad, I went to Swarthmore College outside of Philadelphia. I chose the liberal arts college route, and I really loved the culture of Swarthmore at the time. And that's what drew me there, and it was as I thought it would be. It was an amazing experience for me. So I was like, I want to be here forever. And that turned into wanting to help other people have that kind of experience, whatever that looks like for them. So from there, I went straight to Columbia University in a doctoral program in cultural anthropology, and got to work with students in Columbia in teaching and advising capacities before moving on to other positions, including at one of my favorite was at the George Washington University in DC, where I was an academic advisor for students in over 40 majors and, hundreds of students. And I really loved the experience of working with people one-on-one to discover, to figure out, to grow in their interests and their passions, and to find a path forward in those things. And so I particularly, when it comes to the application process, I particularly love essays and the reflective process that it is to write these. So I'm really happy to be here tonight talking about this topic with you. Matt, can we go to the next slide? Thank you. So before we jump in, I just want to go over the agenda and what we'll be talking about tonight. First, we'll discuss some of the most common types of college essays that you'll encounter in your application process and what to expect from those. We'll talk about some examples of essays, topics for both personal statements and supplemental essays, as well as the essays for the University of California application. We also will discuss personal statement tips and supplemental essay tips, and also tips for the personal insight questions. So tips for all 3 of those types. And also wrapping it up with discussing what it is that's important to colleges to see from you. What are they looking for when they're reading these essays from you? So to start us off, I think most people are familiar with the idea of who have started to look at the college application process with the idea of the college essay. Some may call it the personal essay, some may call it the personal statement, but this is the big essay in the application. And for our purposes here, we'll talk from the perspective of the Common App in particular, because there are hundreds of colleges that use it. So odds are that in your list, most, if not all of your colleges will, you'll be able to apply to them through the Common App. So the personal statement is an essay of 500 to 650 words in length. It is an opportunity in the application. So we think about it in the context of everything else they get in your application. They get your transcript, so they know about your academic background. They get teacher recommendations. They get a list of your extracurricular activities, but they don't always get to talk to you, right? And so this is an opportunity for them to get to know something about you as a person, and get to know something about you that kind of wraps all those pieces up into a personality that they may want to invite into their college community. And so this is a way that it often features in what we call holistic admissions, right? Where they want to look at different aspects of who the person is in order to make their decision about admitting them to their community. And so because of that, because it is actually meant to be personal, it can be written on pretty much any topic. And this is one that often shows a journey of kind of like a story, a beginning, middle, end. And we'll talk more about that because, it's definitely different from the ways that a lot of students have been asked to write before. But what it should not be is that it should not be looked at as a resume or a CV, or if anyone has ever written anything like this before, a cover letter for when you apply to jobs, where you just say more about your experience and try to sell yourself to the college in that way. And again, we'll return to this. As what you'll also find for many colleges is that they have supplemental essays, which are essays that are unique to the school. So these are the ones that the schools design for students who want to apply to them specifically. And these colleges, and so you'll see, while the Common App prompts typically stay generally the same, the supplemental essays, some schools keep them the same over many years, but they can change them. And so in around August of each year, they release or re-release their prompts. And so these questions come a lot of different ways. There are some common themes, which we'll also address later on. But these themes typically lend themselves towards colleges wanting to understand more about you, wanting to understand what your understanding of their school is and how these things come together. These are what I call matchmaking essays, ways in which you show how your interests and your strengths and who you are match up well with what kind of student the college is looking to bring to their campus. And word limit for these typically are shorter essays, but they are very but they vary in length. They can range from, in 50 words, tell me, what trip you would take if you could only take one trip, right? Or tell me a list of books that you have read that are your favorite books, right? And then sometimes they can be up to 650 words, essays where they want to know what exact opportunities would you take advantage of at our school. So these vary greatly. And, we can talk more about how to address that kind of variation in these essays. And then also there's the PIQs, which stands for Personal Insight Questions. And these are specific to the University of California application system. We tend to feature these because in all the students we work with, and I worked with, a wide range of students, they tend to have Common App essays, and they have these questions for the UC system because with one application, you can apply to every school in the University of California system. So that's UCLA, UC Berkeley, UC San Diego, and a whole range of great colleges over there. And so this is different. They have a different structure for their essays. They give you 8 prompts to choose from, and you have to choose 4 of them to write responses to. And each of them are a 350 word limit. So these are not like the Common App setup where we have the personal essay and then we have the supplemental essays, which may be a little more nuts and boltsy, right? The PIQs are what I often tell my students, a blend of these things, and that they're more targeted questions. You are responding to specific prompt, but these are also where you have pretty much the only opportunity in that application to share things about your personality, your perspective, the way that you make choices and do things in the world, right? And so those essays are, I actually really like them, but they're, they're an interesting mix of writing styles and approaches, and we'll talk about those as well. Next slide, please. So I wanted to share with you these are the Common App essays. There's a lot of words here, I know. Don't worry, I will not read them to you. You can find these on the Common App website as well. But I just want to take a moment to address how to make good use of the essay prompts. So in each of these questions, I've just kind of highlighted basically what is the meat, the content of what these questions are getting at, right? So we have questions about your background, identity, interest, or talent. So things that are meaningful to you. We have lessons that we take from obstacles we encountered, or challenges or setbacks that we experienced and what we learned from them. And we have encountering when you question or challenge a belief or idea that's different from your own. So encountering difference and how you've done that and what you've learned from that experience as well. We talk about things that affect you or impact you, and they want to know more about that. And also sometimes there's moments or events or something that just sparks a great change in you, just like shift the direction and way you do things. And then sometimes there's just things that you were just really passionate about, right? They're not about you, but you find them really engaging. You're excited to learn more about them. You're excited to do something about them. And there's space to talk about that too. But at the end of all of this is what I call the whatever prompt, is the one where it just says you can write any topic of your choice. So how do you choose from these and how do you approach these? When it comes to my students that I help in, brainstorming and writing their essays, a lot of times I don't even start with the prompts. I don't make them choose a prompt first. What I start with is talk to me about you and what is most meaningful to you and the things that have shaped who you are and how you see things and shape your goals going forward, right? And a lot of times really great and a wide variety of essays come out of that, because the best essay that you can write is about you and what's meaningful to you. And then afterwards you can attach a prompt to it, or you can just use the whatever prompt at the end. And for a lot of students, this works. For some, it may be that they need these prompts to help jog some of those thoughts and reflections, right? About what is there in my background or my interest that is really meaningful to me? What is something that I've encountered that changed things for me? So, just feel free to, these are not prompts in a way that a lot of assignments at school are, right? Where, you have to write to the prompt and you're going to get graded on it. Just so these are here to help jog your story, and ultimately is your story. So the way that you approach the prompts is that is the priority, and the prompts can work around it especially because of that wonderful seventh option to share whatever topic you would like. Next slide. Thank you, Matt. So let's talk a little bit about some more specific examples of potential personal statement topics. So we talked about how this is a way for admissions officers to learn more about you and the things that are meaningful to you and that shape you and that you want, that really help to direct where you want to go going forward, or what you want to grow into. And so what you'll see in those themes is that there's typically movement, right? So the theme that I see across topics is that a lot of times students are sharing something that was pivotal for them, or that represents something that was a part of their, background, or that triggered something for them. And then there's some description of the way that that experience or that insight affects them now, right? Like, what do you do differently as a result of that? Or, what are ways that you practice this thing that was an important part of you? And then typically they end up with coming away with what I call a takeaway, right? What is your reader going to understand about you as a person that they might get to experience when they bring you into their college community? Right? So really having a sense of, what do I want them to learn about me that they will be excited to experience from me at my at their school. So when you pick your topic, they should be personal, they should be specific to you and your experiences, but you do want to keep an eye on making sure that it is something that your reader, who you don't know who it is, can relate to and understand how this is going to be something that carries over to your experiences in college as well. And so some examples of the themes that we saw in those essays, a lot of times students may talk about triumph or a challenge, so an experience they had that they had to overcome in some way or figure out a way through it. One great example of a student of mine who ended up at Tufts, they wrote a great essay about overcoming. They had a diagnosis of, a chronic illness, and how their experience with it, how they worked through kind of the despair of the diagnosis and coming to an understanding of a new normal, and how it inspired their future goals, right? To help others, kids like themselves, to work through the same kind of challenge as a doctor, which was their career goal anyway, right? And for this student, they told, and it wasn't just about the topic. And it's the other thing I'm going to tell you. It won't just be about the topic you choose, but how you tell the story in a way that no one else could tell the story, right? And one of the thing about it is that there's often Easter eggs in the telling of it, right? So they're like, there's little things they learn about you that are not the point of the essay, but that are additional bonus things they can learn about you. This student managed to show their commitment to learning. The student managed to show their work ethic. The student managed to show their compassion for others, and their determination and all these different aspects of themselves, without saying I am determined, I am these things, but in showing this particular story from their life, they share those things. An example of a talent is, I have students who talked about how they worked very hard on their tennis, right? And a lot of times we say, oh, don't write. There's some topics that get overdone, and because a lot of times they're oversimplified. But this student talked about being very involved in their sport, but then he talked about its impact on other areas of their life and their development as a person, and how it gave them these transferable skills and perspectives that they have started to apply to other areas of their life, that they're looking to expand into other areas of their life. So again, that movement and that growth, right? They're not just saying, I'm great at this and I do it, but like, how has it impacted you in a way that will carry over into other aspects of your future experiences in college? When we talk about, personal growth and experiences that you had and how they change you, I've had other students who write about, whether it's an encounter through something like youth court or service or something like that, when they meet someone who, or have an experience that changes the way that they see the world, right? That takes them outside of their own comfort zone, and helps them to expand their perspective. And they want to know, what did you learn? But they also want to know, what are you doing with that, right? What does it look like now that you've learned this? How does this apply to your life, and how you're moving now and how you want to move in the future? And then also, you can just be, I say for every kind of personal statement, you are the topic of the essay. Don't forget that, regardless of your prompt. But sometimes it really is just you, right? So I've seen a couple of really fun essays. I had one student who applied undecided to a school, and their whole essay was about how, they thought that in high school they had to choose a career for themselves, or choose their whole life path in high school. And so they spent all this time going from thing to thing, trying to decide what it was, and just realizing, I just like the journey, right? And the students showed that through their love of riding their bikes through the city. So there were layers to this, right? Where there are, they're saying that I'm someone who gets interested in things, and I'm proactive in pursuing those areas of interest, right? But they're also showing, hey, I like to bike around the city, and I'm really passionate about my city. And this is not the biggest thing you'll learn about me, but it's the thing about me that makes me a person to you, right? And they show things about their sense of humor and the tone and the way that they wrote that essay as well. So there's so many things that you can be showing about yourself in these essays that is more than just a topic, but also how you tell your story and making sure to deliver those takeaways about who you are as a person. And an example of this is, we have this excerpt from a college-wise essay or a student who worked with college-wise, and they're saying, I hate heights. I'm a complete scaredy cat when it comes to heights. But then their turnaround is that I'm usually pretty calm and composed. I have to be. There's no time to be scared when you're in the back of a speeding ambulance doing chest compressions on a 19-year-old motorcycle accident victim who's just gone into full cardiac arrest, right? And so there's one, from a writing perspective, there's interest. We don't expect to land there when you start with, I'm a scaredy cat and I hate heights, right? And this is, again, the things that makes this a complex person, right? Like I hate heights too, right? I'm a scaredy cat when it comes to heights too. But also now we're getting into, we learn that this person has the skills to be doing these chest compressions on, and this person has the skills to deal with a challenging situation. And I imagine, the rest of the essay will expound on that and to what that means for this person. So that was just, a small excerpt to show some examples of how, the way that we approach these different topics can share so much about who we are.
Great. All right, so turning our attention now to these supplemental essays that Hanifa mentioned earlier, are schools having the opportunity to ask students some questions that are specific to their institutions. We're seeing that many schools are asking students questions that fall into 4 primary buckets. 1, why us? Why do you want to come to this school? Number 2, why major? Why do you want to study what you want to study when you're in college? Number 3 is asking students to expand upon an activity they're involved in and tell us a little bit more about how they spend their time when they're not in class or doing homework. And then number 4 is some iteration of this question asked by the University of Virginia, asking students to reflect on their background or identity and how they plan on bringing that to the college or university that they wind up attending. Now, colleges are receiving a lot of applications. So supplemental essays, they do spend the time to read. They're not going to make more work for themselves asking you to fill out something that's just busy work. If they're asking a supplemental essay question, it's because they genuinely value the answer. And these supplemental essay questions and prompts are great opportunities for students to gauge the quote unquote vibe of the school. Both Pomona and University of Chicago are places that pride themselves on attracting students who think deeply and creatively. Pomona, in this prompt that they're asking, celebrates the quirks that we all have. In previous years, Pomona has asked students what their favorite way to eat a potato is. That was their supplemental essay. They're not making an admissions decision based on if you indicate that you preferred mashed potatoes over baked potatoes over French fries. They're just trying to get a sense of how you think and how you articulate the conclusions that you're coming to. The same is true for University of Chicago. More than any other school that I can think of, UChicago's prompts are a good indicator of whether or not a student might enjoy their time at that school. I worked with 2 students in the same year who were friends, and a few years ago, we were talking about their UChicago essays. One student loved the prompts. They thought that they were the most fun essays that they could ever think of, and they just were energized by them, and those were the ones that they kept going back to whenever they opened their computer. The other student really struggled with those prompts. It was just requiring a different type of thinking than they were used to. They were really having trouble articulating what they wanted to do. And it's not because they didn't have the intellectual capabilities to survive at UChicago. They actually wound up attending a very selective school and had a very good process. But they just realized that if this is what they're asking of applicants, maybe this isn't going to be the best fit for me. So just as we say a college tour is an opportunity for a student to gauge a campus, so too can a supplemental essay prompt when a student might not necessarily have the sense or the opportunity to go and visit that campus. Now, the personal insight questions that Hanifa mentioned earlier, these are unique to the University of California system, but they are different from the supplemental essays, in that your responses to these questions do get sent to every single UC campus that you apply to. So these shouldn't be tailored specifically to Cal Berkeley or UCLA, because if you apply to both of those schools, they're reading the same essay. But these personal insight questions can be a helpful place to start on a student's essay writing journey if they're planning on applying to the UCs and struggling with the Common App personal statement or some of those school-specific supplemental essays. Why? Because they're much more straightforward questions and require students to think about themselves in a variety of ways. With these questions, you're asked to talk about strengths, creativity, challenges, leadership. All of these things can serve as foundational experiences that you use as fodder for additional essays, because the UCs are not getting your personal statement for the Common App, because they're not getting those supplemental essays that you might submit to University of Chicago or the University of Virginia. You can reuse the topics and just think about it in a different way. As Hanifa mentioned earlier, you don't have to answer every PIQ that's being asked. So you still have some choice, which can be really helpful as you're going through that writing process. We'll dive into some more specific tips on the PIQs in just a minute, and how they differ from your other essays. But before we take too deep of a dive on these, Hanifa, can you tell us some tips on how to write the personal statement and also supplemental essays for the non-UC schools?
Sure. So the personal statement tips. Number one, don't try to impress admissions officers, just be yourself. And I know sometimes we get this kind of advice and there's like an eye roll. Surely there's a trick to it. And the problem is you don't know who you're writing for and you don't know exactly what they're looking for. But what you do know is who you are, what your best story is, what are the things that are most meaningful to you. So you will do your best writing telling your story, and the things that matter to you. Two, own your story. And so ask yourself, could someone else tell the same story? This is a thing that all the students are asking me. Is this topic too basic? Do you think that someone else is writing this topic? And I tell them a very honest answer, which is that admissions officers are reading hundreds and thousands of essays. Somebody somewhere has written about the same topic that you're writing about, but they can't tell your story, right? So think about, for example, if it's an essay about background, lots of people share your background, but will they talk about it and share the aspects of it, the personal experiences of it in a way that you could? So this is the thing to make sure that you do in your personal statement, which is tell the story that literally no one else can tell because it is so personal and tailored to you and your experiences. Three, don't repeat information from the rest of the application. Share new information. Think about it as, you want to use every bit of the real estate that you have in the application. Let each piece work for you to tell the most comprehensive story that it can. So don't, waste your space and waste your time in using it to talk about something that will be clear and evident somewhere else, unless you're going to elaborate on something in a way that is new. Sometimes an experience you had that will be on extracurricular may make its way into the personal statement, but only if you're sharing an aspect of it that you cannot otherwise. Last is to sound like yourself. You're not supposed to sound like Google, not ChatGPT, not the Oxford Dictionary. They want you to sound like who you are, which is, a high school kid who is, figuring things out, having some experiences, right? Does this mean to write like like you're writing like a chat to your friends? No, it does not. You still want to use basic rules of grammar and spelling and such, but the tone of it allows for you to speak in your own voice, essentially, and that's what they like to see as well. The supplementals. For the supplementals, and this is huge, do the research before writing. And this is something you can fold into your college list building. A lot of times when you're doing research on the colleges that you want to apply to, and you want to in figuring out what's interesting to you about these schools and all of that. I tell students this matters not just for you to pick a good list that's a good match for you, but also a lot of times this information will be helpful in the essays from one or two perspectives. One, it may teach you about the college in a way that will help you to answer the questions that are asking why us, or what specifically do you want to be doing at our school. or it can help you to understand what kind of student they're looking for in order to be able to draw those parallels between yourself and your experience and the kind of student that they're trying to find through these supplemental essays. And that's a large part of why they're so meaningful to the colleges, as Matt mentioned. Two, you want to, again, select different material. So some colleges will ask you multiple supplemental questions. These are often shorter essays, but you want to pick different material for each of those supplemental essays. So be strategic in thinking about what stories you have to tell overall in your applications, and how much of it and where you want to share for each of your questions. Three, you want to recycle when you can. This does not mean copying and pasting, right? So a lot of times we'll talk about types of essays. Yes, a lot of schools will ask you why us. Why do you want to attend this college? A lot of schools will ask you why this major. A lot will ask you about your community or your background, but you must pay attention to the actual prompt because a lot of times there's a different twist on what they want to know about it, right? Some may ask how you are contributing to this community. The ones that are specific to the school don't want to hear the same things that you told them about what you would do at that other school, right? And so you want to make sure that you're answering their prompt in a distinct way. So yes, you can reuse content often because you're talking about your experiences and they are what they are. But just be careful to be responding to the prompt and how you adapt those essays for each school. The other is don't procrastinate on writing. I think there are a lot of essays that students think are just easy peasy and they'll do it. And then they write their essays and they have completely missed the mark because they didn't understand a lot of things about it. It takes effort. And that's not a criticism of a student. These are new kinds of essays, right? So give yourself the time, even those why the school essays are maybe more, may challenge you a little more than you expect them to, in terms of thinking about what could I be saying here? What kinds of opportunities could I be researching and including in this essay? And there's so many ways that these essays may challenge you. So give yourself the time to do it, to be thoughtful about it, and to have an editing process where you can present your best work.
And with some more tips on these PIQs. So one of the main differences between the PIQs and the other essays that you might have to write as part of your application process is that you are encouraged to respond to these as you would if you were in an interview for a job. If a job interviewer were to ask you about an example of your greatest talent or skill, you're likely not going to start that answer off with an anecdote from middle school. You're going to articulate your talent or skill, and then you're going to back that up with examples. So in a way, the PIQs kind of flip the structure of some of the other essays that we've spoken about, in that you start with the fact and then back it up with anecdotes and examples, rather than start with the anecdote and then speak to the ultimate point you're trying to get to. Not only do you want to answer the question directly that's being asked, but you also want to make sure that you are answering the question concisely. UCLA is consistently the most applied to school in the country. Last year, they received over 173,000 applications. So keeping your readers in mind will be really helpful and important as you are writing these UC PIQs. When trying to decide on what 4 prompts you wind up responding to, don't be afraid to give more than 4 a try. Then you can refine your answers. Also, you want to make sure you're not repeating information across the PIQs that you're responding to. If your greatest talent essay talks about your artistic abilities, then your creativity essay shouldn't also be about those artistic abilities. Then you're taking an opportunity away from yourself to share another aspect of who you are. And this last tip is something that we would encourage for pretty much every essay. It's not specific to the PIQs, but anyone you ask for feedback will give you feedback, but that dilutes your voice. So we aren't saying you shouldn't share your essay with anyone. Having someone to bounce ideas off of and check your writing is a really valuable thing. But there is a thing such as too many cooks in the kitchen when it comes to writing your essays. The more that you ask for other people's opinions, the less your opinion will be in that essay. And that's not something that we want to have. And why is this important? Because what's important to colleges is who you are. When we were preparing the slide deck, we were looking at pieces of advice that were offered by a lot of different colleges throughout the country. And these two in particular stood out to me. So at Harvard, as they say, they want to get a glimpse of who you are, not who you think they want you to be. Authenticity is at a premium in college admissions. And there are so many people that approach this as a math equation with a final answer. If I were to write about this topic, do this extracurricular, get this GPA, then I'll be admitted to school X, Y, or Z. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. There is no secret sauce to college admissions. If there was, I promise I'd tell you the recipe, and then I'd take that show on the road, make so much money that I could retire tomorrow. But it's just not how it works. Let's think of it this way, students. Think about your teachers. Can you tell when they're really interested in the subject matter versus one who may just kind of be going through the motions as they're teaching class? My guess is yes, you can tell when somebody's really into it. The same is going to be true for college admissions. An application reader can tell when a student is really writing about something that they care about versus one who's writing about something that they aren't as interested in but think is going to be really important to an admissions officer. So be who you are. If you're funny, go ahead and be funny. If you're not funny, please don't try and be funny. Just articulate who you are and what you value. I also really love this piece of advice from NYU's admissions office. Admissions officers are on your side. They're rooting for you when they sit down to read your application. Denying students was the worst part of my job in admissions. Honestly, it's one of the reasons why I stopped doing that and started working with students on their application processes. And this sentiment isn't just shared by NYU. Rick Clark, who's the executive director of strategic student access at Georgia Tech, is one of the most trusted voices in our profession. He has an incredible blog that I would highly recommend following. And I was lucky enough to host a program at which he spoke one year, and he told students and parents to think of application reviews like a movie. Nobody goes into a movie and thinks, man, I really hope this is terrible and a complete waste of my time. You go into a movie hopeful that it's going to be amazing. The same is true when an admissions officer is sitting down and reading your application. So when thinking about your essays and planning them out, just know that the people on the other side aren't expecting perfection or anything you can't produce. They're just interested in learning a little bit more about you. And you can't control whether or not somebody else likes your writing, but you can control whether or not you like it. Focus on that. At the end of the day, you can at least rest easy knowing that the person being reviewed is an authentic version of who you are. So that's all we have. We'll definitely turn it over for Q&A.
Thank you both so very much. This part we will not record, so we will pause the recording and then answer questions. We've had so many questions come in, and we've had hundreds of people listening in. So thank you both so much. That was really great insight. And I think that this is really great advice and a really great start for our families. So I wish everyone really good luck. I'm going to stop the recording and we're going to move on to the Q&A.